Today we're starting the vlog for part 3 of my Lord of the Rings reading experience, which will be The Return of the King. I have no idea why I can't say this right. So before I get into reading, there's a few things I want to talk about. First is my experience so far in the Lord of the Rings fandom. So I knew nothing about this fandom, and a lot of fandoms are just toxic and not that fun to be a part of. I'm not a big fandom person, but I have found that the people who write comments on my videos, explaining things to me, giving their opinions on stuff, are people, for the most part, who are big fans of Lord of the Rings. Obviously, this is spoilery. They're big fans of Lord of the Rings, and everyone's just so pleasant to me. I know nothing about the magic systems or the lore, and I'm just going into this as a completely new experience, having only watched the movies a few times in my life. And everyone's just really kind and really thoughtful, and that's just really added to my experience reading these. So I've appreciated that a lot. So thank you for your comments. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for explaining things to me. I've really appreciated that through the way. The second thing I want to talk about is while I was filming my vlog for part 1, the Fellowship, I went to a used bookstore in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania while I was traveling, and I found this copy of The Fellowship of the Rings, which I really liked. I will put it there. And I wanted to have all of them in these copies. I looked into these copies. I can't remember the name of the woman who designed them, but she had never read The Lord of the Rings when she designed them. I don't think she could physically acquire them. They weren't published in the US, and she was US based. It was something like that. And so she just had to go off of what people said the books were about, which is just kind of a funny thought in itself, story behind the artwork. And they don't really vibe with the books at all, but I really like them. I think they're cool looking, and obviously I have to find them used. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go on the hunt. I love hunting for used books and going thrifting and stuff. So I'm like, all right, I'm on the hunt for these. And when I was on vacation visiting family in California, I went to so many used bookstores and did not find them. And I was just on a trip in New Hampshire, and I found them. It was so crazy. So I found The Two Towers and The Return of the King. So let's see if I can hold all 3 of them up. Okay. Oh God. I got this. Okay. So they all kind of go together. And there's something really pretty about how they kind of all go into one another. We'll do a close up. And yeah, I like these copies. I can't believe I completed my set before I even finished the books. So yeah, just wanted to share that, and we'll just get into my reading experience. Okay, I'm checking in for the first time relatively late. I am in the middle of chapter 5. And I haven't checked in yet because I haven't had much to say. I feel like this is the most bored I've been while reading, being in Gondor. I mean, the crew is very much separated. We've really only seen Gandalf and Merry and Pippin, and Gandalf and Pippin are in Gondor. And I'm just the king isn't really the vibe. The person who played him in the movies gave him a lot more emotion than what I'm feeling in the book. Just all of the scenes, I'm just kind of I don't know, bored by, I guess. And then Merry is the other character we've really been following, and he's kind of just feeling out of place as is Pippin and is like kind of desperate to see Pippin again, and Pippin hasn't really thought about Merry all that much, thinks about food more often, which is funny. I mean, if you've watched all of these already, this is the third one. I am reading The Return of the King, so if you want to watch this one without watching the others, feel free, but if not, I will link to the first one, so you can watch the series, and they're all spoilery. Anyway, I'm checking in now because this is like, I'm learning while I'm reading that the lore of this world is the most interesting part to me. And after I finish this, I'm definitely going to move on and read the Silmarillion, and probably move on from those after. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can read in the world. There's still, from my understanding, things being published relatively recently, editing the works of Tolkien, or his children, grandchildren, I don't know. Someone's editing his work still. And those are the lore is the part that's intriguing to me. So we just met some men of the woods, I guess, who just like live in the woods and are kind of like wildlings. The man speaking, they speak common too, but it's just interesting. I'm intrigued to see that a bit more as I read more into the lore of like these other peoples, if that even comes up, because there seems to just be an ancient energy about them where they've lived and kind of existed in this space for a long time and probably have seen men rise and fall, but have still been present for all of it. And I just think it's interesting now he's going to lead them on a path that no one else knows about, because it's kind of lost to history, but it's only lost to like certain histories. I don't know if you could hear that. It's bizarre noise. Anyway, I think it's also interesting how much Gandalf's name has changed. He's like Gandalf the Grey, and then Gandalf the White, and then Grey Company, and now people here call him like Mithrandir, which I think was happening in the second book too. I can't quite remember, but it's just, I remember someone putting in the comments earlier on that like that's what Gandalf is, and you learn about more of that in like the lore of the worlds, because he's not really human. But yeah, I'm just gonna keep reading. Hopefully this will pick up pace for me, because this has probably been the biggest struggle so far, is getting through these sections. Me from the future, I have never done this before, but I am now like halfway through the book. I finished book 5. And I liked the second half, like our second week of reading for our buddy read. And I liked it so much that I was like, how did I not like the first part? Like the first 5 chapters at all, really. Like I wasn't enjoying myself while I was reading. So I decided to go back and reread them, which I've literally never done it before. And I'm listening to them on audio, which I've read the whole series physically, but just to like fit it in, and like, because I'm still reading the book 6 as I'm rereading this part. So just so that there's like some difference in how I'm consuming them, so I don't get the 2 sections confused. Anyway, you don't really care about that. I just finished chapter 1 again, and there is a lot of foreshadowing that is like so seamlessly weaved in that I just totally miss it. So I'm hearing it back now, and I'm like acknowledging and recognizing these things, and it makes me think that a reread of the series has to be like really fun, because it's like you're noticing all of these cues that you weren't noticing before, and you're watching the weaving of the story instead of like being surprised by it, which is how I'm consuming this and experiencing this. Yeah, rereading chapter 1, I liked it. Like I liked the introduction of Denethor. I don't know how I missed the more villainous parts of him in this. I think that I must have just been like mindlessly reading. Like, I don't know. I have no idea. But I liked Pippin Pippin's parts. I mean, Pippin is a main part of this first chapter. I didn't totally acknowledge the first time I read it that Pippin was kind of, because Boromir died, Pippin was like, I will give my service to you, which I think is cute. And we finally got introduced to the fact that he's not technically an adult for a hobbit when he's talking to a young boy and, like, having a fun time with him, which I liked because it kind of goes back to, like, the hobbits more, like, fun, good-natured, like, they're not really, like, war people, and just, like, him having that opportunity to kind of, like, hang out with a kid, I appreciated. But yeah, just doing my reread of the first part while reading, well, the first 5 chapters while reading the second part, but, like, I'll edit it so this isn't going to be confusing. Anyway, bye. So, the Sauron's ring wraith things. You meet them first, and they're riding on these black horses, and you're like, well, that's, sucks, because their mode of transportation is fast, but whatever. Then they're flying on these wing things, and you're like, great. Now they can get farther distances, they can see a lot, like, this is nice. Sarcasm. And now the Lord of them is flying on such a large creature that it seemed like it was becoming dark out. And it is a winged creature that has no feathers, and it's of an older world with fingered webs, a croaking cry, and it just dug into Theoden's horse, and I'm like, cool, yeah, we just keep upping this, don't we? Yeah, and then Eowyn just killed it, like, a page later, so it's fine, we're all good. So, you guys know by this point that the lore is, like, one of my favorite parts of these books. And Eowyn just killed the Lord of the Nagzul. And, it said, and this is the kind of language I like, but I'm more interested in the content of this one. It says, shapeless they lay now on the ground, torn and tumbled, and a cry went up into the shuddering air and faded to a shrill wailing, passing with the wind, a voice bodiless and thin that died and was swallowed up and was never heard again in that age of this world. So it's interesting that he wrote in that age of this world. I take that to mean he's not technically gone. Like, the ring wraith is, like, there was no body associated with it. So yeah, I'm sure that it gets explored in lore in the dozens of other books of Tolkien's that have been published, but I found that interesting. Okay, and I guess she died. I'm like, did that happen in the movies? I don't remember that, but I didn't like her in the movies, and they didn't change much about, like, her character and what her character did necessarily. I think that she joined the battle a lot earlier, but they kind of cut a lot of those scenes together. But I liked that she obviously had, like, a romantic interest in Aragorn in the books, but he didn't reciprocate it, and so nothing that she did, I was talking about this with Mariana in our last check-in, nothing she did felt like it was for Aragorn in this. It felt like it was for herself. And I was actually kind of shocked by her death here, so I guess I liked her character in this. So many check-ins over so few pages. I guess, like, no one from Rohan checked to see if she had a pulse and she's still alive, so scratch everything I just said. Well, not really. Don't scratch the thought that I like her more in the books than I do in the movies. Denethor is, like, the exact kind of prick that would lose his mind, try to burn himself on a pyre with his son during a huge battle in Gondor so that Gandalf can't be involved in the battle and has to save Faramir instead. Yeah. Also, from this angle, you can see my partner likes rocks, and so on our trip to New Hampshire, we went to a bunch of rock places. Those little 3 are the ones I picked out, and he picked out a big one. those aren't the only rocks we ended up with. So I just finished the chapter, The Pyre of Denethor, and it was explained that what is that thing called? The Palantir, like the orb thing, Denethor was using it, and it was like eroding his mind away, like the fear and whatnot and what he saw in it. And that kind of spurred his insanity, which I don't remember being explained in the movies, but that makes more sense than what I think the movies did. Although it could have done this and I just forgot. So we're not getting Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli's perspective of this battle. I'm slightly disappointed. Yeah, I like the chapters we had where Merry and Pippin were separated because we did get a better sense of them on their own, and also, at least on Merry's perspective, like really his need to be near Pippin and like how alone he feels without someone close to him with him. And Pippin and Merry just kind of reunited, and Merry's kind of dead on his feet and his arm is numb from stabbing that creature. Or the Lord of the Nagzul or whatever. And they're waiting for a healer to come, and it says, so Pippin, let Merry sink down gently onto the pavement in a patch of sunlight, and then he sat down beside him, laying Merry's head in his lap. He felt his body and limbs gently, and took his friend's hand in his own. The right hand felt icy to the touch. I haven't said it since the first book, but I just really appreciate these like gentle moments of friendship that are between two men and still full of this, what do I want to say, like love for each other and like nurturement of each other that you don't see in literature really that often, and it's just kind of a joy to read, even in these dire circumstances that it's happening in the book. We're in a council with Gandalf and Aragorn and like the other leaders right now, trying to figure out what to do, and we're coming to the ring, which we haven't actually like talked about in a while in the book, and I haven't actually thought about in a while in terms of like the ring's power. So I'm trying to refresh my memory, but the ring was never, no, the ring was used by I'm remembering things. There's multiple rings. The ring that Frodo has is the ring to rule them all, which is the ring that was used by Sauron back in the day that Isildur, am I saying that right? Aragorn's, the heir of him, cut off, or is that the movie? No, I think this is what happened. Cut off of him and took it for himself and then died. I'm thinking this is the book, although I could be getting this mistaken with the movie. I'm having like very visual recollections of this, which makes me think it's the movie. And then there were the elven rings, and the elven rings the Sauron never touched. So he never got to see the spoils of those used. But the ring itself, the ring to rule them all, the one that the Lord of the Rings is based on, has power in just the fact that it's his object. And at this point, we destroy the ring, and while Sauron isn't wielding the ring is giving him power and is helping him to become more corporeal, though he's not at this point. I think I'm getting this right. Let me know if you're more familiar with the story and I'm getting this wrong, because I've obviously only read these once, and I'm trying to retain a lot of information, so I'm not sure if I'm retaining this correctly, but I think that's what's going on at this point. So, regardless of what happens, the ring needs to be destroyed so that Sauron loses the power he was gaining through just the ring's inherent existence. And there's nothing left for him that would make him corporeal, because he can't have power over the elven rings because he never touched them. I mean, I'm moving forward. I'm almost done with book 5, and I'm really enjoying it at this point, which I'm happy about, because I must have just been in a weird reading mood when I read the first 5 chapters, because I wasn't feeling them, and it felt bizarre to me since I was liking the entirety of the rest of the series. Okay, a few things I'm liking right now. I'm still in the same chapter. I'm liking that the other kings, like the prince and Irahim and Éomer, are being brought into the discussions about the ring. I like that we're showing this, this coming together of minds and, to be greatness together. It's showing humans coming together across many kingdoms and uniting for a common good. So I appreciate that. Another thing, I felt in the movies like I was confused about what was happening here. My memory of it is, why are we fighting Mordor when the ring is what matters? And what I like about Tolkien is that he very clearly explains, why things are happening the way they are. And I think that's why, though this writing, I think, would be harder to get through as a child, it is a little denser, and while it is a book for adults, teenagers and kids have really enjoyed this series, because he does lay things out for you really well. It is explained, we are going to basically try to move Sauron's eye away from the ring because he doesn't know where it is, and we are going to try to be basically a decoy, and we're gonna fight him and fight his armies in order to protect the ring, which is our main goal. So I don't know if that was clear in the movies. It wasn't clear to me in the movies, and now I'm much more on board with what is to come. First off, okay, so the forces, Gandalf and everyone, just got to the gate of Mordor, and had a conversation with someone from Sauron's envoy, which I found intriguing. I really liked that they brought out Frodo's coat and all of his stuff that they had taken from his body, and it was clear that they just thought of him as a spy, and they only mentioned him and not Sam. So through that, the company, being intelligent as they should be, can understand that, Sam is, or one of them, is still on the mission, and only one of the hobbits was caught. And they had no mention of the ring, which means the ring is still safe. So I just thought that was a good way of giving us that information without directly telling us this information, and also kind of matched up the timeline of what is happening with Sam and Frodo a little bit more, since it's been a while since that's been aligned. Okay, Tolkien better not be fucking with me. Did Pippin just die? I have actual tears in my eyes. I don't know what to say. I think Pippin just died. And his thought fled far away, and his eyes saw no more? That's typically how Tolkien tells you that someone died. I'm having a really hard time with this. Okay. I just loved this chapter. The Black Gate opens, but I don't think I could share more thoughts right now. So I've kind of been feeling and saying this whole time that Frodo is an unknown, and you can see in the movies, like, sorry, I thought it was my cat outside, but I forgot I let her in anyway. You can see in the movies his, like, draw to the ring, but I think that we just started book 6, and at the point where Sam has the ring, and he's, like, feeling the power of the ring and saying, like, he could, like, what if he took it for himself, and feeling, like, the weight of it, that's where I feel like we've seen for the first time, like, the mental struggle of holding the ring and what you can presume Frodo's been going through this entire time, but we haven't been privy to it. So Sam just saved Frodo, and he, like, told him he had the ring, and then Frodo kind of, like, had a moment, and was, like, possessed by the ring, essentially, and was, like, kind of went into Gollum mode, requesting it back, demanding. And I really like that these scenes with the ring, now that they're in Mordor, have become more, like, visceral, and it's kind of, like, what I've been expecting the whole time, to start happening, but now that it is happening, I'm, like, into it. So we're at Mount Doom, and Frodo just took the ring for himself. So he put it on, and I don't know if it's because he's in Mordor or because he claimed the ring, that when he put it on, he became visible to Sauron, and Sauron saw him, like, basically at the heart of Mount Doom, and all of his mental energy went there, and it kind of describes that, like, all of his followers kind of stopped what they were doing because he no longer was thinking about them and thinking about, like, having them pursue whatever activity they were doing, which is interesting because that means that these orcs and beings and whatnot were magically under his rule, which I hadn't actually known, I don't think. But now obviously have to get back to this because, like, this is shit going down, which I'm surprised it's happening so early. My Kindle is saying I'm only 40% into the book. That's including the appendix, but it's chapter 3 of book 6, so there's still more to come. Okay, so at this point the quest has been completed, at least in terms of getting the ring destroyed. I want to talk about Sam and Frodo's relationship, and I know I've done this a lot, and I actually read last month a Jane Austen book, and in that there was the use of the word master in the same way that Sam uses the word master, so I've kind of gotten over that. I don't think that I don't see them as friends, but I do see them as having, like, I see them as having just like a subservient relationship where he is, like, his gardener, like, he's below him in class, Sam is to Frodo. So it doesn't constitute a friendship for me, but I do want to comment on it because I think that, Sam is always looking out for Frodo. And there are moments where Frodo does, like, show his care for Sam, but I think that in this last part where they're going through Mordor, and I love the descriptions of Mordor in this part, they're so, like, just how he describes, like, the bushes that they do come across, and, like, the lack of water, and, like, I don't know, it's just very harsh feeling, and he does a great job describing, like, this totally desolate place. Sam had been attempting to comfort Frodo through, like, words, and he realizes that that's not gonna really work at this point. Like, Frodo is hopeless, and the ring is a burden, and the deeper he gets into Mordor, the heavier it weighs on him, and he begins, expressing, like, concern for him and showing that he cares and trying to support him physically. So there's a lot more touching in these scenes. Like, he's cradling Frodo's head while Frodo sleeps. He's touching his hands and holding his hands a lot and, like, kissing his hands. And then, at the end, obviously, as he's taking him up Mount Doom, he physically carries him. And it's interesting to see how he changes how he comforts Frodo from a mental to a physical place, but also something I've touched on before too, like this sort of like lack of this toxic masculinity that you see in other books, generally speaking, but also at this time. I just read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and it was written around or published around the same time, and it had like much more toxic masculine things in it that are reminiscent of what happens now. So it's just surprising. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say it's surprising, based on Tolkien's experiences in life, but to have something so gentle in relationships that are so gentle between two male characters and have this intimacy between them is quite interesting and is an enjoyable experience as someone, like, as a modern reader. So Pippin is alive. I'm sorry. I'm mad about that. I'm mad about that scene because it was written as if he died, and now obviously he didn't, and that really is irksome. I don't like. Yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. Okay, so it was just explained that Gimli found Pippin, crushed under like a horse or bodies or something, which I think it was the horse. But, I mean, isn't that what killed Theoden? Like, Theoden, like a king, like a massive man, and it somehow didn't kill a hobbit? I don't know. I feel like if this was written nowadays, I mean, a lot of things would be different, but I think he would have killed off Pippin. I mean, I already said it, but I am annoyed that, like, he made it seem like he died. Like, Pippin was basically saying goodbye to the world. And he was crushed in the same way that Theoden was, and Theoden died, so it was kind of like, yeah, Pippin died, but Pippin didn't die. And everyone got off okay. I think that's like a trope that definitely existed more in older fantasy, where like all of your characters are alive at the end, which is not something that happens nowadays, and as often, like, people are more willing to kill off main characters, which I like. Like, it makes their beat feel, like, I was, obviously, you watched the clip, I was sad when Pippin died, but it, like, or I thought Pippin died, but it gave the world, like, stakes that I feel like is missing from stuff like this. Because, I mean, realistically, if there was a battle, someone would die. Okay, so I just recently changed out these lights, and they're like color changing ones, so I decided to go with some vibe lighting right now. Okay, but what I wanted to comment on, so Gondor, so Aragorn came back into the city, and Faramir is basically like giving the kingship to him, as the steward. And it's like a custom that they get it from the past king, and you might have to go into like their grave to get it or something. So he opens a casket and holds up an ancient crown, and it says it was made of pearl and silver, and it was just like, I mean, like, you're supposed to be imagining this glorious crown, and I'm like, does Tolkien know anything about silver? Because you could keep that in like a room for a day or for a year and it'll tarnish and you have to clean it. So, like, in my head, I'm just imagining this like tarnished crown, but I don't think that's the vibe he was going for. So Gandalf just referenced this being the third age of the world that's ended, so I will be interested to read, I'm assuming this will come up, in the Silmarillion, like other ages and the other works of Middle-earth. I'd be interested to see if those explore, like, the first ages. So I just finished chapter 5. And that kind of wrapped up everything with the war. Like, we got to see what happened with the ring, and then we saw what was happening with them storming the Black Gate. And then in the last chapter, chapter 5, we saw Faramir and Éowyn while things were going down, but in Gondor. And we still have like Yeah, we still have 4 chapters left, so I'm just wondering how much more happens in the ending of this that wasn't in the movie, because I remember it wrapping up fairly quickly. I'm on the chapter Many Partings, and we just got to Isengard, and I just have to say I would read like an entire series with the Ents, finding the Entwives. Like, I love them so much. They're, especially Treebeard's quotes are just so on point. I love all of them. And then we just had Legolas and Gimli leave them to go on their own thing to the Fangorn Forest, and it's sad to watch the partings. I really have been enjoying this chapter so far. I like that we pushed forward this whole time. And now you're struggling against all of these things, and the first 2.5 books are them getting to this place, and then you watch all of that deconstruct as they all go back and see the places change or see no change at all, and just like the friendships and the people that they're dropping off as they go. It's a really nice way to end the book. I'm really enjoying this part, although it's very sad because we're now seeing the Fellowship no more, and Gimli says, like, "We will send word when we may, and some of us may yet meet at times, but I fear that we shall not all be gathered together ever again." So we just got back to the Shire, and this is so much different than the movie. I'm like, I've enjoyed the moments where it's like I feel like I'm reading a whole new book, or like experiencing a whole new thing, because like, there's sections that are completely different, and I was experiencing that a lot in the first book, but I haven't really been experiencing that as much. And like, the Shire is totally changed, and they're just getting arrested, and Sam is just like talking shit. So yeah, I'm really liking this chapter so far because it's totally new. It's a bummer that they got rid of this part of of the books in the movies, because this sense of these hobbits like taking on these huge tasks and leaving their homeland and like, stopping the end of an era, and then coming home to their home being destroyed and overrun by evil, like, that they weren't expecting, is so sad. Just like seeing all of their homes destroyed and like new things built up, and like basically not coming back to what they originally left. And it was alluded to in earlier on that when Merry and Pippin found the weed, that someone was, trading with Saruman, and they found that in the movie as well, but they didn't connect those things in the movie, and like got rid of this whole scene, which I just find it provides like, it's not just this happy ending, even though they're most likely gonna fix everything and kind of save the day. There's the battle that occurred at the Shire, and they still had to fight for something after all was said and done, or where the story would usually end. Okay, so I'm doing my final check-in. This is very late. I finished the book about a month ago, and I watched the movie then, and I was planning on checking in, and I was just not inspired to film myself, so I didn't. But just to wrap up my thoughts about this series, because The Lord of the Rings is such a huge foundation in what modern fantasy now looks like. It is so inspirational to other authors, and really changed and like massively influenced the trajectory of modern fantasy. It was surprising to me as a reader how refreshing the books were. Yes, there were tropes. Like, yes, none of your main characters died.
And yes, it was very much a battle of good versus evil. And there were noble characters and there were evil characters. And the evil characters didn't have a whole bunch of rationale behind them. But the amount of world building is just unlike anything I've ever seen or experienced. I mean, reading the appendices, mind you, I didn't like all of the appendices equivalently, but just the language, the languages, the etymology, the genealogies, the eras, the timelines, seeing like the whole timeline of the Lord of the Rings and seeing it as like a blip in time in Middle Earth, how the timelines kind of portray it, as opposed to this like grand masterpiece, which is what the books were, was very fascinating. The characters were enjoyable. It was much more lighthearted than I thought it would be. I was laughing out loud a lot. There were moments of joy. There were moments of tears. There was this this book specifically, The Return of the King, was quite a whirlwind of emotions for me. And just the book's overall gentleness. I had such a fun time with them. I think in comparing them to the movies, I had watched the movies before. I was glad I had seen the movies because it kind of like built the path of where the books were gonna go, while the books like opened up a lot more. You got to see a lot more characters. You got to see a lot more world. There were additional scenes. I definitely preferred the books, but the movies themselves, while I had qualms with some of them along the way, were a really great representation of like the heart of what the books were and like the soul of the books. As far as my trajectory with reading further books, I was thinking I would move on to the Silmarillion next, and after finishing the books and finishing the appendices specifically, I think I'm more likely to read The Hobbit, and then move on to the Silmarillion. I think I'm going to read The Hobbit kind of as like a grouping with this reading experience, and then I probably will not read the Silmarillion until I think I'm going to reread the series. So I would read the Silmarillion for the first time, and then I would go into a series reread and hope that kind of roots me a little bit more in the lore, so I'm not having to pay attention as much lore things, and I can really focus on the enjoyability of the rereading experience, because as I had said earlier, I did reread some chapters towards the beginning, and I was catching so many things that would make the reread experience of these novels so rich. So I think that's all I want to say about the books. This has been a really fun journey. It's been interesting recording my thoughts along the way. If you've watched all of these and you're still here, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch these and hopefully giving me your thoughts in the comments below, because like I said at the beginning, just to iterate it once more, I really enjoyed the collaborative experience of these books. I read them as a buddy read with Mariana, which was a great experience. She gave me so much more perspective on characters. I was like kind of poking fun at Merry earlier on in this when he was just thinking about Pippin and wanting to be with him, and she empathized with Pippin, she empathized with Merry as a character in a way that I didn't, and her explaining her empathy of like being this, not being in someone's shadow, but of being the follower of someone else, and allowing them like the decision making and then losing that person or not having that person to do that for you really repainted my experience of reading this, as people's comments below have as well. I've taken them all into consideration. They've really like brought more life to my reading experience. So yeah, thank you for watching this, and until next time, happy reading.